All right, so good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to be with you this evening. My name is Carolyn Hoffman. I'm a board-certified naturopath from here in Virginia. My field is traditional naturopathy, and I am also in the field of digestive health as well as lymphatic therapy. So it's my pleasure this evening to be sitting in on behalf of Dr. David Silverman for the Wednesday Wellness webinar. And I'm going to have some fun time sharing some information with you. And I'm pleased to see everybody on what will be the final call for 2019. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will get going. And so it's kind of with a lot of pleasure that we will be able to share this evening's information. All right, so let's So tonight we're going to talk about ASEA cellular health. First off, we just need to make the statement that ASEA does not diagnose and treat or cure anything, but what we are looking at is an amazing approach to understanding how we can actually make choices that enables our body to respond differently to age and diet and stress and environmental toxins, and so ways in which we can actually keep healthy and maintain vitality to the end of our life, which surely is the goal, right? My journey into this was really kind of serendipitous. Back in 2011, someone actually shared the technology with me, but they didn't really communicate with me what was significant about this. And so I was pretty skeptical. So if you're on this call this evening and you're skeptical, then I'm with you. I understand exactly where you started. And I guess I was fortunate that in 2017, I came across a different friend who again introduced me to the technology. But I will say that when she started to talk about ASEA, I was kind of rolling my eyes thinking, I'm really not interested, because, you know, sometimes we make decisions based on very little information and we miss opportunities. So I am really fortunate for the fact that at that point in time, there was a gel technology development that had come along that wasn't there in 2010. And I'm going to talk about what drew me into that. But let's start looking at, first of all, health and dis-ease. I mean, all of those things exist below the surface, and we may not always know that things are going on, but eventually when things get out of balance enough, what we do see happen is those things have common disease names. You know, arthritis is because we've had some kind of inflammatory imbalance going on for too long. Maybe we've had a hormone imbalance and we've ended up with a pancreatic challenge and diabetes. You know, everything starts below the surface. And so sometimes we think that we're really healthy, but in fact we don't actually know something is brewing until we go to the doctor, and unfortunately they give us some title to some dis-ease. But why is that? Well, if we think about the fact that below the surface we are nothing more than a bunch of cells, and we live and die at that cellular level. We have about 75 to 100 trillion cells, and within each of them is something really significant called the mitochondria, which creates trillions of cellular messages every single second. You're probably familiar with them from biology at school. And part of what they do is to trigger and create the immune system to come and detect when there are problems with the cells, and then also to protect and to repair and to replace those cells. And so at a foundational, really simple way, that is the process of healing. So if that's going on continuously, every minute of every day, we stay healthy. But when those messengers don't work in the way that they should, and cells don't get replaced and repaired, then challenges begin to happen. And so if those cells are in the brain, we end up with challenges with cognitive function. If they're in our stomach, we end up with digestive issues. It doesn't really matter what the issue is. It's basically a symptom of the fact that the cell living in that community, wherever that is in our body, is not doing what it should be doing. So let's talk about what is something that comes from that mitochondria. So if we think about what our cells are made of, they're basically just little bags of saline. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it. If you've ever been, unfortunately, in an ER room or gone into a hospital, you know that they will actually hook you up to a saline bag. Why? Because that's what every single cell is made of, and it is essential for us to survive. But inside that is something called the mitochondria. That mitochondria produces something called ATP. We're really going back into biology here from high school, but you'll know that that's the energy that drives every cell, that keeps us functioning, and helps the cell do what its main functions are, which is to consume nutrients that we provide it, to get rid of the waste as a byproduct of having consumed the nutrients, and to reproduce themselves. But in doing so, in spinning off this ATP, they also produce these little byproducts called reductants and oxidants, positive and negative charges that were at one point considered not particularly useful. But there was a development that became known back in the 90s that established the fact that these molecules weren't useless. They actually had a really important function, one that is so essential that if we weren't producing them in every cell of the body at this point in time, we wouldn't be able to communicate, we wouldn't be alive, we would die in a matter of minutes. And that fueled an enormous amount of research into what these molecules could do for the body, their impact, their involvement in every aspect of our health, and not just our health, but just every aspect of everything that goes on. They're signaling molecules, so they keep the communication going. And now, as a result of it, we have about 200,000 peer-reviewed published articles. If you go to somewhere called the NIH, National Institute of Health, where all of these published articles are placed, and about 18,500 of them are redox signaling specific. So when I looked at this about 2.5 years ago, there were about 12,500 if I did a search on redox signaling, and an awful lot less if I actually just did the word redox. And you'll see on the right there is a book that is very much a Bible written by Narain Naidu on what these molecules do and their significance for the human body. But back in the 60s, when they first found out about these little reductants and oxidants, these positive and negative charges, they considered them completely useless. So it took about another 30 years for them to establish that they weren't useless, that they were literally essential for us to stay alive. But the challenge was, they always thought that they would never be able to reproduce them outside of the human body because they're not stable. They're really fleeting molecules. They just get going and they do what they need to do, and they just keep on regenerating, because basically redox molecules are fleeting and rather like fireworks. You know, they fire off and boom, they're gone. And if we're at July the 4th, we know we get to see continuous fireworks going on for a period of time. But that's basically what's happening in every single cell of the body. Trillions and trillions and trillions of these signaling molecules. So if you have something that's that fleeting, you can kind of understand why the scientists thought that it's just going to be impossible to do anything to produce those outside of the human body. So what we want to talk about tonight is the breakthrough. The breakthrough isn't so much in being able to make them, because in research, they had little machines and these things would generate molecules, but the challenge was that they would only hang around for about 10 to 30 minutes. So that's the fleeting nature of them. So we know that they're able to produce them, and we know that they've been able to use them for over 20 years in research, and that is why there is so much known about what they do. But it's the breakthrough that came about thanks to somebody called Dr. Gary Samuelson. Dr. Samuelson was asked by the founder of the company ASEA, Verdis Norton, to actually head up and take what was about $30 million of initial research that had been going on for about 10 years and try to make something out of what was this research. The goal was really basically to turn it into something that was commercially available. They were going to sell it to a pharmaceutical company. But he was asked to come in and say, take a look at this research. They've got something really interesting, but they don't really know what they've got at this point. And the company was basically going bankrupt, so they were selling off this technology. So in comes Gary Samuelson, also pretty skeptical, right? Because here's someone asking him to research something that comes from salt and water, saline. And most of us would think, well, how can you have anything clinically significant out of simply saline? But his research discovered that what was going on here was redox signaling molecules. And he did what was considered to be the impossible. He actually found a way to create and stabilize bioactive redox signaling molecules outside of the human body. So if we think about what was considered impossible, if we know in science, if you have something that's positive and negative charges like magnets, right, they're going to join together. And that is basically what was considered to be impossible, that you couldn't stabilize something like this outside of the body because it would immediately come together and be inactive and not useful. So in the bottle, we actually have this impossible feat. And so we have, if you think about it, like being able to create, filling the bottom half with hot water, the top half with cold water, and to stabilize and keep those two bodies of water apart and maintain their temperature for about 15 months. That would definitely be considered impossible, but that's basically what he managed to do, to find a way to stabilize these positive and negative charges in balanced pairs. And the only time they actually start to get to activate are when they are consumed by us. If you're a real researcher and you love to get into the depths and weeds of biochemistry, then go to PubMed and look up redox signaling or redox, and you can cross-reference it with anything that you're thinking about in terms of dis-ease conditions, and you'll see the research that's there. Don't go to Google's itself, because that's really just a general website. It's not a research engine. Make sure that you go to Google Scholar, where you'll find real research when you come to looking at things that are scientific. Dr. Gary Samuelson has his own website as well, which has a lot of information there, and there are a whole bunch of references there on that slide that you might want to take note of and go and research. Sometimes people get confused and they say, well, I want to see the research on ASEA. Understand that ASEA is the brand name for what's inside the bottle. The bottle is redox signaling, and that's what the research is done on. And you can take a look at ASEAScience.com for the research that ASEA specifically has done by third-party validating research bodies. So let's look at how did they manage to do it. So if you have something that's just fleeting and is gone in nanoseconds, how can you manage to do that and create it outside the human body? Well, obviously you have to start with the same things that are inside of us, because we need to replicate exactly what the body's doing if we're going to produce the same things that the body's producing. So they take actually pristine salt, which is kosher salt, Morton's kosher salt, and deionized water. Why those two components? Because you can't have anything other than exactly what's inside of us. So pristine salt that doesn't have any other organic material in it, because you wouldn't be able to produce these molecules, and then deionized water, which is literally the purest. And what they do is, Gary Samuelson found a way to put this through a patented 3-day electrical process. So in this system, it does just what our cells do inside of us. It breaks them up, reconfigures them, and 3 days later you have bioactive, stabilized redox molecules. And so that is what is inside this bottle. And what we have here is also something really significant. This piece really caught my attention when I started to look at this beyond simply being a practitioner and using something that could help people. It definitely had a big impact in my practice. I was able to see things that I've been struggling with people for a long time, who could not achieve that root cause resolution, and be able to just do things that I had never seen be able to happen with just simply supplements. But what we have, which is also the breakthrough, is that this is the only redox cell signaling supplement in the world. There is no other company that's managed to do this. There's no other scientist who's managed to achieve what we've achieved here. And so this is really an enormous breakthrough. This piece became kind of significant to me because it was different. It's not about nutrition, and it's not about homeopathy, and it's not about energy medicine, even though all those things are really supportive for the body. But this is about how our cells communicate, and much, much bigger than that. So this was something I'd never been able to offer people before. If you'd like to see more about what this does, there's an awful lot of resource information on amazingmolecules.com, and a website that is as a result of Dr. Ward, who is the medical advisor for the company. You'll see redoxexperiences.com. That one is a password protected website. It actually has a lot of personal experiences of his clients on using this technology. And so that one's kind of an interesting one to look at if you'd like to see people's personal experiences. But please also go and look at the REDOXBreakthrough.com. That's an amazing video, and will give you a lot of information from a lot of different doctors and scientists, and a lot of information on people's experiences there as well. But the company is kind of an interesting company. When I really took a bigger look at this and decided whether I actually wanted to be involved in sharing this on more than just a person-to-person basis in my practice, I went to take a look at the company, and what we found was something that was really significant and really, really different. So this was really a business venture originally. Burtis Norton was formerly the chief strategist and CEO for Kraft Foods. So he comes from a really traditional business background, but being a strategist, he's very, very smart. And he spotted the ability to have the opportunity to buy a technology from a company that was going bankrupt. And he had not been able to help them salvage this and raise money. And in doing so, that's where he took this original research, brought in Gary Samuelson, and their goal was simply to create something that they could sell to a pharmaceutical company and just flip it and make money. End of subject. That's kind of what business people do, right? But in that journey, what is really interesting is in producing the product, they started to beta test it with people that were nearby the facility. They gave them the opportunity to drink this and just give feedback. And so those 40 people who were the initial test group, at the end of 2 months, had actually become a significantly larger group of people, 135 people, but not simply local. People have been passing this off and mailing it to their friends and family. So you have to kind of ask yourself, it makes common sense, there must have been something significant about what they were feeling and their experiences with the product if someone's going to take the time to go and mail it around the world. And that really was the pivotal point, because Burtis Norton was offered an enormous amount of money for this research once it had been stabilized. And this pharmaceutical company decided that if they were going to purchase it, then they also wanted to make sure that the company that was offering this product to these beta test people and the other people around the world was actually closed down. And at that point, they had to make a decision. Were they going to go for the business venture, or were they going to keep this in the hands of people? Because I want you to go and look at the ASEA Genesis video and actually look in the eyes of Burtis Norton. You'll understand what really motivated me about this company as being something so significantly different from any other company I'd seen in this field. They are very much purpose-driven, because there were people in that first beta group who have been told by their doctors that they really didn't have much of an option for going forward with their life, to go get their life in order. And yet here we are, this was back in 2007, so we're 12 years on, and some of those people are still alive. That is enormously significant. But at that point, when they realized that they had something so important, this became a purpose-filled, mission-driven company. This was no longer about taking money that could change their lives and they could walk away and retire. This was about wanting to do something that left a legacy for the company. And what you'll see is that in 2009, after they ended up deciding that this was going to be something that they protected and looked after, they founded the company and they produced their own products. So what you're looking at on the right-hand side is the manufacturing facility. Both of these are in Salt Lake City, outside Salt Lake City, and this is a brand new building as of a couple of years ago. And the facility there controls the manufacturing. So there is nowhere else that produces this. It's an FDA registered facility, has good manufacturing procedures, NSF compliant. In other words, what that means is that you have something that's produced to the same regulatory standards as a drug is manufactured. They're actually open in 34 countries. So from my perspective as a clinician, I have this amazing opportunity to be able to impact the lives of people around those 34 countries, because I don't have to only engage with somebody face to face in my office. So that is enormously empowering as a practitioner, to have something that is perfectly safe to be able to offer to people way beyond the scope of where I live and work. They distribute from 18 global distribution centers. And the company has been very strategically and very sensibly and very cautiously built from the beginning to be a legacy company, because the challenges in this industry and in many business industries, right, they start up and they fail pretty quickly. In this particular industry of direct marketing, 3 to 5 years is very much a pivotal point that many, many companies are gone. And so Verdis Norton was determined that this was going to be a legacy company, and he's built it very strategically and sensibly. And so over the last 10 years, they've done about 700 million. But our sales are projected to reach about 1.5 billion over the next 5 to 7 years. And we're seeing significant increases in awareness, and now also sales are just exploding in this last year. We've had record sales this last year and phenomenal growth. So we're kind of at that pivot point where awareness and access just become a really interesting little mix that starts to blow out the awareness of the company. And that's when you see real growth. So from that facility where everything is produced, they also have a company called Bioagilitics here, batch test and validate every single production of the ASEA Redox. So you'll see on the back of the bottle is a matching logo, which is Bioagilitics. And what they do is in that batch testing, what they're looking for is to prove that you're not purchasing just a bottle of salt and water, you're actually purchasing bioactive, stabilized redox signaling molecules. And so they stamp that on every bottle, and they batch test and validate everything. Everything is tracked in the same way as drugs are. Bioagilitics actually does the drug testing validation for about 80% of the pharmaceutical companies in the country. Now, the FDA require pharmaceutical companies to do that, but in nutrition and the nutritional industry, the FDA does not regulate. So companies that go that extra mile are doing it because they know that they have a stellar product, and they want to validate and prove that their product is just as safe and is just as well manufactured as any drug that you're going to purchase. But that's more important with a drug in some ways, because we know that there's a side effect to every drug. You can kill yourself with drugs. The one great thing about this is that there's no potential for any toxic intake whatsoever, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as I go through it. They have 34 patents worldwide, and you'll see that they partner also with companies called NC Research Campus, Duke and Harvard, Pacific Northwest, and Dr. David Neiman, who runs the Appalachian State Human Performance Labs, also does a lot of third-party testing with professional athletes. And we'll also talk about the Torrent Lab study that came out in gene signaling. So what we have is third-party validation on the actual redox molecules produced in here. Although these redox molecules are no different than the ones that have been produced for the last 21 years, the only difference is that these ones will be stable for 15 months, whereas the ones that they use in research are for consumption from being immediately made. So let's move on to why would the production and the ability to consume something like this commercially be important? Well, redox molecules actually diminish within our body at 1% per year from puberty. I think that's a pretty unfortunate statistic, but it kind of accounts for why we age. And so if we think about this, that if we consider ourselves when we're young as having a glass full of these things, every single cell is producing them. We've got tons and tons and tons of mitochondria. In fact, when we're young, half the body weight, dry body weight of the body is actually mitochondria. So it kind of tells you how important that is. But these are producing these molecules consistently, and we see them go down by 1% per year from puberty. So we begin to see and feel those visible signs of aging. Well, who's taking a look at this? Because you're probably sitting there saying, well, maybe I've never heard of this before. And so if this is so significant, wouldn't I have heard of it? That's kind of a logical thing that a lot of us do, right? If we don't know about it, why is this so important? Back in 2 years ago, Huffington Post actually 3 years ago now, Huffington Post actually wrote about the 5 emerging technologies in science that's going to shape our futures. And 4 of them are research fields, but it was really interesting that they specified redox signaling technology. Well, why did they specify redox signaling technology? Because this is so significant. It's considered to be just as important as maybe the development of penicillin, or even, you know, maybe the light bulb. And let's look at why this is becoming more mainstream. So this is part of their article, and you'll see that they actually listed ASEA. Well, why? Because we're the only company that actually has this technology. And you'll see that's the old bottle that was done before the gene study. And so the gene study is now actually written on the back of the bottle here. So the Torit Labs gene study that we'll talk about is actually listed there. But what does this talk about? This talks about the fact that we have the first opportunity in the world to actually reinsert inside ourselves essential cell signaling molecules, and we can replenish and repair and rebuild something that we need a lot of if we intend to stay healthy. And I think you know what that was like when you were younger. You know, you would be on the go all the day and you wouldn't feel tired. You'd recover quickly if you cut yourself. You know, you healed fast. You certainly didn't have an achy back from playing all day the following day. And that's part of why, is because we had these molecules keeping us healthy and re-energizing us. 2019, Forbes actually mentioned this as part of their recommendation for gig workers. They were actually talking about nutrition, but they actually listed ASEA'S redox molecules as part of a way to make sure that you manage and protect your health. So it is going mainstream, and we're going to see more and more of this. So the genes of our body contain the blueprint of our health, and we know that nowadays, that these toxins that we see in the things that we breathe and the things that we consume and we drink in our food and our air is definitely playing an enormous part in changing our health. And one of the other things is that it turns off the genes. So these environmental toxins are switching off the signals that need to be accurate if we're going to have accurate health. And we can see that in our skin when we see aging, is that you can see all of those wrinkles that are coming as part of aging. But you have to know that what you see on the outside is also happening on the inside. So it's not just on the outside. So let's take a look at the challenges that people have. We know that in America, 50 million Americans suffer from autoimmune challenges. There are 54 million having inflammation. 1 in 3 deaths in America are related to cardiovascular disease. We know that enormous number of people, 57%, have digestive disorders. And we also know that 80% of women suffer from some kind of hormone imbalance. And I'm sure you know somebody, if it's not yourself, that's in that area. So as you listen to this, think about, you know, the impact this can have for you, or for someone that you love, or if you're a practitioner, for the people that you're caring for. And Torit Labs is a very well-respected genetics research laboratory, and they're based out in Salt Lake City, and you may well know them from Ancestry.com, but they do a lot of highly technical genetic research. And they decided that they were going to look at the impact of the ASEA redox molecules. And here was what was really interesting. They did an 8-week study, pre and post, with blood work. But what they found was that the people consuming in this double-blind crossover placebo study was the people consuming the molecules, the redox molecules, had 100% positive improvement in 5 gene signaling pathways, 20 to 31% improvement in that signaling, but everybody saw that response. And the placebo was a 0. That is outstanding. I don't care who you are. I've spoken to a lot of people, and they will all tell me in the field of research that they don't know of studies that come up with that kind of statistic. Placebos, we know, are something that our brain is going to influence. But here's those 5 pathways, and think about where the balance of sickness leads us in the United States. Here we are, an improved immune system health. It helped to maintain a healthy inflammatory response. It helped maintain cardiovascular health, and it supported elasticity, arterial elasticity, really important. It helped to improve gut health and digestive enzyme production. And it also helped to modulate hormone balance and support vitality and wellness, right? Literally mimics all of the major challenges that we're seeing in the United States, and certainly is very common around the world. So I don't think we're particularly exclusive in that field. But I want you to just take a look at the inflammatory signaling pathway, something called the ERG1, because these aren't just single things, they open up other doors. And the ERG1 actually opens up about 15 doors behind it. And if we look at the fact that serotonin is that first one, maybe you know people who have a hard time feeling happy all the time, or their mood goes up and down a lot. Maybe you know people who are struggling with sleep for circadian rhythm. Perhaps the NRF2 pathway, that's the antioxidant pathway that made me actually not look at ASEA back in 2011 when I was working in those fields with something totally different. That's the natural antioxidant enzymes that we produce in every single cell, and it is the most powerful way to keep ourselves healthy. Human thyroid signaling. We know a lot of people who have those challenges. Insulin signaling, maybe you're a diabetic or you know somebody who is. So you can see the inflammation pathway, that gene signaling pathway that should be writing good instructions. These are the things that it's going to influence. So antioxidant health, we know, is important. It is that partnership between oxidative stress, and the NRF2 pathway is that production. It produces glutathione and superoxide dismutase. Those are the master antioxidants that come from our cells. Much more powerful than consuming antioxidants as supplements. But what it also showed in one of the studies was that taking redox molecules actually increased that glutathione by 800%. And so that is enormous. Other studies show lowering oxidized LDL and DNA. So we know that the genes write our health. If they're writing good instructions, we have good health. But the great point about this is also that the choices that we make can influence the outcome. So here you have a choice. I don't know what your history's been like, but going forward, you have a choice to change your future if it's not been that good. And that's the exciting piece about our health. The environment that controls the cells, which control the organs and the tissues, and glutathione is also a master detoxifier. It cleans out the waste inside the cells. And so if that fish didn't like where it was, it could maybe jump out and find another bowl to go to. But our cells don't have that capacity. They need to have the environment of that waste production of energy cleaned on a daily basis. And so we know that Mayo Clinic is talking about the need for this to be done. These are toxic cells. They become very toxic, and we know that they impede organ function, create chronic inflammation, they destroy the production of enzymes in many ways, and they shorten our lifespan. And so this is a really important piece in itself that we can do to make sure that we're cleansing everything on a daily basis. But if we consider ourselves as something that's important to keep healthy, some people would say that athletes are like the Maseratis of the human field. They need to make sure that everything that they do is spot on and perfect and is top of the line and absolutely clean and does nothing but improve their performance. And this got people interested when they started to look at how does redox impact athletes. One of the things that they found was that it produced more endurance and strength and recovery and mental stamina. And that came about because they did a little experiment on mice that they ran to exhaustion, and then they fed them redox for 7 days and they ran them to exhaustion again. And what they discovered was that those mice actually ran 29% further, which they don't normally do just for the sake of it. So as a result of it, we have, through those studies at Dr. Neiman's laboratory down in Appalachian State, a lot of people using this technology. If you just come on, maybe you could mute yourself because I can hear you and we want to keep this as quiet as possible for people listening. That'd be great. So we have two sides of the cellular wellness. The inside out is by consuming and replenishing and rebuilding those vital molecules. And then the outside of it is actually taking the technology that caught my attention back in 2017, which is the skincare line. Except there's another side to this that's really interesting, and that was the piece that caught me. But it's called Renew 28 because it actually was the subject of a 28-day study at Dermatest, you can see, in Germany. They research and give validation on the effectiveness of different skincare products. And a 5-star validation is not only top of the line, but it's very difficult to achieve. And so these were the results. What they found was 16% skin cell renewal, 23% smoothness, wrinkles, elasticity, and 50% blood flow, which is enormously important. And so you might want to see what actually happened. These are examples of the way that it changed things. So you can see the change in the skin, you can see the change in the levels of inflammation. You know, young people frequently have these kinds of inflammatory conditions with their skin, which definitely impacts the way we feel about ourselves when we're young. It certainly impacts the way we feel about ourselves even when we're older. And for a lot of women, when they hit the hormonal period in their 50s, they start to see this come back again. But you can see the changes here on inflammation and here on also the wrinkles. These are further use of it. This is an all over body skincare product. It's not simply for the face, even though obviously most people want to make sure that they look as nice as they can. It was certainly something that everybody raised their hand at an event that we had a couple of weeks ago when we asked who was interested in skincare. It was pretty universal. It didn't matter whether it was men or women. But here you can see how people have applied it to the arms, to the knees, and even to dry skin on that heel. So what this does as part of it is to actually support the skin overall. And we'll talk about the other use for this, but in doing so, because this was really cleansing out a lot of the toxins that are in a lot of skincare, they went ahead and actually created a complementary skincare line of a face wash and a moisturizer and a more intensive version of this skincare molecules, the redox molecules. And so those are another set of studies that were done. You know, who wants to photo age? If you're in the sun a great deal, there's a great reason to use this product because it really is beneficial. And a lot of things to think about is if you're on a gluten-free diet, then you really don't want to be putting on products on your skin that also have gluten. So this is gluten-free, non-GMO, and it's just truly the most amazing skincare line that I've ever come across. But here's the way that it caught my attention. If you have something that hurts, what we recommend is that you rate that discomfort. You know, if it's maybe you've got a headache or you've got something in your back that's hurting or your knee, maybe your shoulders are stiff, who isn't nowadays when we sit at computers all the time, just rate that level of discomfort, 1 being not very much, 10 would be like it would be if you were going into the ER, being the worst. Check on how much range of motion you have because it could just be tightness even if it's not hurting. Shake the product up. It is the same product that's inside here, except it has a gel technology to suspend it. And then just apply this clear liquid, and as you can see, it's just totally clear to wherever hurts. It's really great to have as a great relief. We had somebody the other day who didn't have anything that really hurt on their neck, but they were a little stiff, and so we asked them to put it on, and what we do is to do it 3 times in 5 minutes. And then wait 5 minutes and see what happens. You know, it's pretty significant for me when I found that I was just asking my clients to give me feedback in the first weeks that I bought this product and I was trying out. And I'm sure you would say that, you know, how many times have you taken a pain pill, for instance, and it didn't do anything, right? But maybe it works 50% of the time. Maybe you know that pain pills work 70% of the time for you, but nothing all the time. I was just blown away because I literally had a 10 out of 10 success rate in using this with people. It didn't really matter whether it was a hip issue or whether it was a head issue or whether it was a sinus problem or whether it was a broken toe. Everybody gave me feedback that shifted this enormously and in some cases completely within 10 minutes. So that was very much, to me, a total no-brainer as the product that could really benefit people. This is not about an analgesic. This is using those molecules to get that communication going again and really help the healing. So if you find that you use it and it doesn't, maybe you're at a level 8 and it shifts to a 5, then just apply it again, because sometimes we just need more molecules to get that communication shifting sufficiently, and then you're going to see some really interesting outcomes. But you know, that is A really great way, if you're skeptical about anything, go put this on 10 people and just take a look and see what happens. You know, that grabs people's attention very quickly when you can take something that used to hurt and it changes. But the other piece is, this is the molecules. This is the communication. This is what we think of if we were building a house as the labor and the inspectors, to make sure that the materials, which is the nutrition piece, actually work really well. And so what we have is this really compatible, bioavailable, whole food, non-GMO program, which took them about 3 years to come together and put this together. And they are designed specifically to go with the redox molecules. Really amazing group of nutritional products. And I've been really, really pleased to look at, you know, both how they've manufactured, the sourcing of it, and the whole production. And I'm really seeing some amazing results with this, which is, so I would recommend. I'm not going to talk longer about it. We are much more familiar with what nutrition is, but this is the only product range that actually is designed to be biocompatible with the redox molecules. So when it comes to the liquid, I would just encourage people to take expectations and put them in the right perspective, right? We're not looking at a 30-day miracle cure. We're talking about how do we actually rebuild something in the body that you are already making, and that if you didn't make, you wouldn't be alive, right? We're thinking of a way to anti-age. I mean, truly, 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 this is the only thing that I know of that directly addresses aging. And the fact that the Mayo Clinic are talking about the fact that it's really important that we get this clearing out of old cells and re-energizing cells all the time has a huge impact on how we can expect health to live and how we can expect to age. So it's not a miracle cure. Don't think about this as, well, you know, I'm going to try this for one week, God forbid 1 week. And, you know, I'm going to expect all sorts of things that have never happened in my health to happen. We need to be realistic about this. Is when you're working with holistic healthcare, you're coming in underneath the body and you're supporting the body's mechanism to do the work. The body is what heals, right? Well, all we do is provide the pathway, either the communication or the nutrients, to actually help the body do what it's designed to do. And so we see that when we take this, probably about 15% of people will see a change in the first week, but we know over the next 3 months, 90% of people are actually going to get to where they're looking to get to. But here's the important thing: benchmark everything about your health. We have some great benchmarking forms. Write down everything, because maybe it's your knee that's the problem, or maybe you know, it's your stomach that's the challenge. You've got digestive disorders. But we want you to mark down everything. How well do you sleep? You know, what's your energy level like? You know, what's your cognitive function like? Where do you hurt in general? Just record everything as a baseline about where you are. Consume about 2 ounces twice a day is pretty typical in the first week. At the end of that first week, re-benchmark and have a look. If you haven't seen anything, we're going to suggest that you increase it to the clinical amount. The clinical amounts, all these studies are done on 8 ounces a day. Double up temporarily, 2 or 3 weeks, and keep checking on where you're going, because maybe your stiff knee is going to take a month or 2 months to improve, but maybe the fact that you don't sleep at night too well, or you wake up in the middle of the night frequently, or you fall asleep by 3 o'clock in the afternoon and are desperate for a cup of coffee, maybe that's the thing that will shift in that first week or 2. So benchmark everything about your health and just set great, sensible expectations. Independent studies do show that this is proven to decrease disease risk factors. Start with 2 cases. 1 bottle is what most people would consume in a week if you're doing 4 ounces a day. But if you do that and you double up in your 2nd or 3rd or 4th week, you'll actually run out of it too quickly. So they give you a money-back guarantee on 2 cases. We suggest that you start there so you've got an opportunity to do the double up. The double up was really significant in getting my attention to the liquid when my husband's inability to exercise and breathe for the last 26 years shifted dramatically when we actually increased the amount to the 8 ounces a day. And I would suggest that you buy it through the company because there is a money-back guarantee. It's fresh product, it's validated. There's a lot of fake stuff on Amazon. Please don't go there and do that. You have no support in the using of this. The associate that is sharing this information with you is going to be your support person, is going to help you know how to use it, and they're going to help you get the best results out of it. So we would definitely recommend that. ASEA is completely non-toxic. These are all clinical studies, so you have no capacity for this to have a toxic level, unlike a drug. You can drink a whole bottle in a day if you absolutely needed to, and there'd be no downside to it. You can't be allergic to it because it's native to the body, so it's not about being natural like a blueberry. We don't produce blueberries. We produce these, and it's native to the body, so you're not going to be allergic to something that you're already producing. And there are no contraindications with ASEA and other drugs. That doesn't mean that you might not need the same level of medication that you might currently be on. If you start consuming this and your body begins to go back to doing what it should have been doing, you're probably going to find that you'll notice things change. And that way, if you're on medication, we recommend you go back to your doctor and get them to check and get them to make adjustments. But that is a very common story that we hear from people, is that, you know, the medications they were on, they now no longer need as much or any of them at all, which is really exciting because that's the whole goal. And this is saline as it starts. All right, but it's not salt water, and a lot of people get very confused by that, and we have to think about the fact that saline is not restricted in hospitals for people on sodium restricted diets. The amount of actual sodium inside this is in a 4-ounce amount is about ½ a carrot or a glass of milk or a slice of wheat bread, and there isn't anybody on a sodium restricted diet who can't eat those things. ASEA's mission was the piece that really kind of caught me when I first started to look at it, beyond knowing that this definitely was something that could help my clients. And was this something I wanted to put more time into beyond the people that came into my office? Well, that was a decision that I had to think about. And so when we went to meet with representatives of the company, we came to learn about the fact that as a result of that mission-driven decision to turn down the money and actually keep this in the hands of the people, they're very much driven by the fact that the goal is to better people's lives and to be a force for good in the world. And it's really exciting to be part of that piece of it. So there is the business component. Most people are not necessarily interested in it. Most people are interested in the product because they know that it could be a really great way to stay healthy or to become healthier. Maybe they want to help their friends or their family. That's fine too. Maybe they want to look great and not wrinkle as much. Maybe you're an athlete and you do want to have more stamina and improve your performance. But there is also the giving it, paying it forward, because this is such a breakthrough, and because nobody else has this, there is nowhere else that anybody can go. And because we are still very much still in the new era of pioneering something that is not yet so well known, you know, we need to get the word out. And so we invite people, if that's their inspiration, to who do you know? Maybe you can pass it on to a few people who will pass it on to a lot more than you may do. That's fine too, but this is a paying it forward business, and it has such rewards. The first person that I shared it with when I was sitting and reading through the biochemistry and books and trying to work out whether this had any relevance was someone who'd been crippled by an autoimmune disease for about 30 years as a result of a relationship with an insect bite. And this woman had no life and multiple complications. And it was just my suggestion to her that maybe she might want to think about this because it wasn't anything that she'd done before, and because it was about cellular communication. But that changed her life. Within 30 days, she'd had about a 90% shift in those conditions that were causing her not to have a life. And to this day, she's now back doing the original job that she was no longer able to do because she couldn't get up and function. And so to me, that's the important thing. You know, we paid it forward, and what happened? You changed somebody's life for the better. That's the biggest payoff. But from sharing from maybe one person, it does pass on. I found that, you know, it didn't really matter what my goals were, that when people get great experiences, they will tell other people that need help or need to know about something that maybe might be the solution for them. And so it passes on. It's a bit like a relay race. You know, you just never know where that baton is going to go. But what happens is, because, as I said at the beginning, we're in 34 countries in the world, that information gets paid forward all over the place. And as a result of it, every time people embrace this product, you also have the ability to earn some degree of income related to all of those transactions. So you can actually choose to have this most amazing purpose-driven business from home, and yet it's an international business. But it produces something different than working on a daily basis, hour by hour, and trading time for dollars. It produces reproductive residual income. But it's financial independence, that some people start small and can become big, or they just make it a background additional income for the things that maybe their regular job is not providing for them. But it also has a great deal of benefit for tax savings. But for me, the biggest piece is the time freedom, because I can choose how I want to spend my time and where I want to spend my time. And the great fun is I'm no longer tied to one single office. I can go work anywhere in the world where this company is and impact the lives of other people. My goal initially when we used the product was to do nothing more than to share this so that we can pay for our own product. We have 5 people in the family. There's about $750 for 5 cases. That's quite a considerable amount on a monthly basis. So my goal was, well, I can share it with a few and I can start to at least pay for my own product. That's a goal for many people and nothing more than that. But it could be that that $750 that was my monthly goal and then became a weekly income and then has gone on since there could be something that drives being able to pay off any of these kinds of things. I don't know where you are in your life, but maybe it's also about purpose, because every sale has a proportion of it that actually goes to something called the Advancing Life Foundation. And we can also practically and physically get involved in supporting this. So this is the philanthropic piece of why would you be associated with ASEA? The ability to help communities in Ecuador who are struggling and building schools for them so that they can actually empower their communities and have a better life. The ability to take children out of sex trafficking and rehabilitate and take down the perpetrators. And our newest project, which is Vision Cambodia, to be able to take clean water and literacy into those areas. That's a great reason in and of itself to be part of this business. If nothing else, it's not always about the money, right? Maybe it's the fact that you're attached to and attracted to the notion of having friends and people who have the same kind of vision that you do. And you want to have that friendship and you want to travel the world with them and you have a lot of fun. Fun is another great thing to do it for, but you know, it's benefiting people, because at the end of the day, income only comes because people are actually enjoying the product and ordering it regularly and getting life-changing benefits. You know, no business thrives if their product doesn't work. So we know that we're actually changing the lives and helping people all over the world. So my question would be, are you ready to invest in yourself? Maybe it's just as a consumer, retail or wholesale. Maybe it's as a consumer connector. You're the kind of person that's always going to share something that you like or is good. Maybe you recommend people to films or restaurants. And so you're probably motivated to tell other people about things that can help them. And to us, it's just invite them to learn the information. What they do with it after that is theirs, their information and their choice. Maybe it's to pay for your product like it was for me, or perhaps the car loan or the mortgage or the college loan. I don't know what that income would represent. It has to represent something because it's not about the money. Or maybe you have a bigger vision. Maybe you've got a passion to do something much bigger in life than currently what you're doing, and this could provide that venue. Reproductive residual income is entirely different than simply having money in the bank that produces residual income, even though that's very limited nowadays with the interest levels. This is like writing a book that every time it's sold, you're getting more money, except that that book might write another book for you and another book for you. This is reproductive. It's entirely different, and it produces a much larger degree of freedom. And maybe it's that contribution to society. But at the end of the day, wherever you go with this or whatever you do, I would entreat you to pass on the information. Invite somebody else to at least learn, because maybe it's something that they are hoping and praying for. And it's certainly been my experience in life is that it's very humbling to watch the change that you can bring to someone's life when it's the thing that's the solution for them. But most of all, we all have to say thank you very much to Verdis Norton, this most amazing man, along with his son Tyler, who saw a vision for something that was so significant that they were willing to be selfless and turn down a huge amount of money and say this has to stay out there in the hands of people, and that we're at the beginning of something big with great purpose. This is probably the most rewarding piece of being able to support and continue and perpetuate his legacy and just help people around the world. So I want to thank you for listening to this. I hope that you've heard something that's kind of interesting to you, and that you are, at least if nothing else, motivated to help yourself and do what I consider as being the single most influential product I've ever come across, and definitely has changed the way that I've been able to focus on my work with people, that instead of plowing tons and tons of nutritional things and struggling to find solutions to get to the root cause, we can really empower ourselves to do what our body is designed to do to stay healthy. And so I would say to you, don't overlook it. If you have more questions, we're going to stay on the call and be able to answer those questions for you. Let me just stop the recording.